Hello again, everyone. This is Kaz Beelan, and you're watching or listening to Casual Conversations, a program where we talk to people who are very important to our world. And today, back with us is our very special guest, and his name is Joseph, but we know him as Joe Peters. Hey, Joe, how's
Hey, how
it
you
going?
doing?
How's it going? Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year to you as
You-
well. I wanted to start off this time. We talked a little about where the word hyperlocal came from. And so I looked it up, and hyper means very. So when you say hyperactive, it's very active. So hyperlocal means it's very local. And I think that's one of the things we have to keep in mind as we absorb real estate information is that a lot of time the person talking to you is in Chicago or Florida or California, and that has nothing to do with New Jersey. So what you hear is not necessarily what's happening right here. It's happening somewhere in the country. What I'm going to focus on today is just Hunterdon and Somerset County and the little fringes that touch it. For instance, I have one new listing in Middlesex, which is like a mile or two off the focal point that I deal with. Um, Last time we talked, interest rates had just dropped a point and the market had gone berserk. Um, since then, the on the national front, the Fed has lowered the interest rates by a point on the Fed rate, which is a rate that, in effect, they give to banks, not necessarily dictating what happens in real estate, as we'll see. And as a result of them lowering the rate by 1%, the rate went up 1%. So what it's doing is it's building the pipeline. People are better time borrowing money, building houses, but in effect, the mortgage rate went back up to just over, let's say 7%. Depends on the day of the week. It's 6.8, 7.2. It's an average of 7%. And that's not good news, but in effect, I think it's what we're going to live with going into this year. Our biggest talking matter this year is going to be affordability. And affordability takes its toll in about four different places when you buy a house. First thing, people don't really buy a house for an amount, they buy a house for a monthly payment. They sort of figure out how much is the max I can afford. And then based on that, what can I buy the house based on the down payment, the taxes, the insurance, and whatever. So there's 4 points to a mortgage payment. There's the principal and interest. That's what you give the bank. There's the taxes, and then there's the insurance. And what's happening is, interestingly, we're seeing a very high spike on the last two, the taxes and insurance. As a matter of fact, 1/3, I'm reading, of all mortgage payments right now, the taxes and insurance are the bigger part of the payment than the principal and interest. And that's absurd. It used to be like maybe an 80-20. Now it's like a 50-50 roughly. So affordability is an issue because it comes down to how much can I afford to pay each month. You always need a mortgage person to get involved because, in effect, a mortgage person will go you through the various scenarios. They're going to look at your current situation, employment-wise, investment-wise. It's going to take a look at your ability to pay and what your credit looks like, what else you owe money on. Like first-time buyers, a lot of times there's student loans involved. But the affordability is the word of the day right now. It's getting expensive to buy a new house. It's more expensive than it was 3 months ago. We're hoping that it will come back down, but we're not forecasting to see interest go below 6.5% this year.
Well,
And
Joe, that reminds me, and I'll remind everyone who's watching this on video, and they know how great we look. But if they're listening to us only, whatever format you're listening to like, subscribe to whatever channel or outlet you're listening to or watching. But affordability, when we're talking about uh, buying a home and the different expenses with that, what about the difference between renting a home and buying a home? There's a huge disparity in
there
what.
is, and a couple of things have come to light in the last 3 months since we talked last. We last talked the end of the third quarter. It's now the end of the fourth quarter, beginning of the first quarter. We saw an onslaught of new rentals being built. They pulled back a little bit over the last year, but there were like 36,000 new rentals being built in New Jersey. A lot of them were being built further out, so because people didn't have to necessarily go into work the way they used to. And as a result, they're now coming to fruition, and they're sitting not necessarily at 100% occupancy. We're sitting at about a 4 to 5% vacancy rate in central New Jersey right now, where Hunterdon and Somerset County is. And the reason is that they built them in the wrong spot. They built them for the right spot 2 years ago, but it's not the right spot today, because what we're starting to see are companies requiring people to be in the office more than they used to, if not 100%. We're even seeing it at the government level with the talks of the new administration. I want you at work. So we have apartments that are probably less money than buying a house, but it's sort of a trap. We talked a little about this last time. And one of the two, there's two parts to the trap. One is because they're a little less money, you tend to take on other debt. And then when it comes time to buy a house, my goodness, I shouldn't have done that. I don't have as much money per month to buy a house with. But the second thing is the real American dream is putting 10 or 20% down and getting 100% growth on the entire value of the home. For instance, if you, let's say 10% is easy to divide with, you buy a $500,000 house, 10% down, $50,000 up front. You're not getting growth on $50,000. You're getting growth on a whole $500,000. It's 10 times your investment. That's called leverage, getting more out of it than you put into it. So we're not seeing the first-time buyers buy the houses that they used to and start accumulating wealth. And as a result of that, what we're seeing is, and this is not just over the last couple of years, it's been forever almost, a person who owns a home after 2 years and a person that's been in an apartment after 2 years, there is a 40-to-1 ratio of net assets. In other words, the home went up in value, so there's a lot of equity in the home, but the apartment didn't. You've been paying somebody else's mortgage, be it a landlord or a corporation. And it's a trap that we're getting into. We're borrowing more money because we're not paying quite as much as a house, and none of the expenses that a house has, like the maintenance and upkeep. But at the same time, we're not building that equity, which is your future.
Well, Joe, I don't know where you are right now, but you look like you got a nice tan going there. So you're in Florida or someplace, but nice to see.
We did spend a couple of weeks at our timeshare in November, December, so there's still a nice tan going on.
Well, you are the Somerset Hunterdon County real estate expert, but you can help people anywhere in the world, probably from your knowledge of years of everything. And just a reminder that it's jpeters.com is the website. Here's a quick view of what the website looks like. You can go there, jpeters.com, and give him a call at 908-304-4660, and he'll talk to you like he's talking to us right now.
Absolutely. I love
He doesn't just talk to me.
people.
He talks to everybody.
So last time we talked about the inventory levels at the end of the third quarter, we had about 275 units in Hunterdon County, and we had about 450 units in Somerset County. Somerset County always does roughly double the volume of Hunterdon County. Right now, we're sitting with 148 units in Hunterdon County and 250 units in Somerset County. So we dropped from 275 to 150 roughly in Hunterdon, and from 450 to 250 roughly in Somerset. What happened? Well, that was back when the rates were almost a point lower and everybody went out and bought a house that was marginally interested. And as a result, all the inventory is gone. So secondly, there's a seasonal effect. We don't list a lot of houses, and from Thanksgiving to Super Bowl, it's sort of dormant. There's some houses that come on the market, but I just looked this morning, and typically on a Friday we have 30 or 40 listings. In Somerset County, we hit 2. So it's a slow time of the year as well. Last year, we had 176. We have 150 today, 148 in Hunterdon. And last year, we had 222 in Somerset, and we have 254. So Hunterdon County has been a little more active than Somerset County because it's still not too far to commute to New York. It's a little further than Somerset County, but in effect, the prices are more reasonable. You're typically going to get into a property similar size and value, maybe a little more acreage in Hunterdon County for 15 to 18% less than Somerset County. So it still strives. And then there's not a lot available in Somerset County. It is the closer to New York, the more hot the market is. The other thing we got to look at, I think, is interesting is where people are sitting today that do have a mortgage. We're going to talk about how much equity they have, and we're going to talk a little about how much their interest rate is. The 40% of all the homes in the country are owned outright. That's an amazing number. 4 out of 10 houses are just owned outright. Nobody's paying a mortgage on it. So there's a lot of assets in those homes. And then the other 60% is split 30-30 or 50% of the 60%. 50% of the other houses that are mortgaged are mortgaged over 5% or under 5%. So the over 5%, it's a normal market. They bought high. The under 5%, and this is an amazing statistic, 1/3 of all the mortgages that are out there are now at 3 3/4% or lower. That's our problem. It's called the inability to move because you're into a trap of low interest. These people are sitting with a lot of equity. We're looking at an average equity, and this includes houses that are owned outright, of $400,000 in New Jersey. But people will say, look, I've got a 2 1/4, 2.5, 3% mortgage. I'm not going to move into a 7% mortgage. The answer to that is, first of all, you're absolutely correct that it's a big difference. But secondly, you have a lot of equity. There's a lot of things we can do with that equity. We could use that equity to do a refinancing deal. It would probably give you a lot better rate than what a total mortgage would be. But you need to talk to a mortgage guy to do that. I can't give you financial advice. The other thing that's interesting is we're not building new homes. The homes we're building are higher end homes because it costs a lot of money. We talked about this last time as well. I welcome you to go back and listen to the last one because these things build on each other. But in effect, we made it so expensive to build a house, nobody's building entry-level housing. Secondly, we're not having as many children as we used to have, so that market is diminishing. We talked a little about that last time. As a result, the average house being sold today is 40 years old. 40 years old, that's the exact average age of house for existing inventory. New inventory is being built in the 800 to 1 million and up level. And that's not the preponderance of our market. That market's doing very fine. With the high tech and the inflation and salaries, people are doing very well for themselves and are buying those houses. The houses that are hurting are the under 400, which is where your first time buyer would be. It almost drives them out of the market. And then secondly, the 4 to 6 is the next tier that's hurt. That's about flat. The under 400 were probably down 20%, 25% versus a couple of years ago. But the 4 to 6 were about flat, which means we're equal to where we were a couple of years ago.
Hey, Joe, I have a quick question. So you're saying a lot of the younger generation are making more money. I think that's what I heard you say. So is there an average, like what's the average age of the first-time home buyer? And then like what is the oldest home buyer who might have money, you know, either they're moving to someplace else or whatever? Like, is there a
Right, right.
youngest and
So,
oldest.
so the average age of the first-time home buyer, male is probably about 34, 35, female probably 30, 32 right now. Their average salary combined, if they're both working, and usually they are, is probably somewhere in $150,000 range. As a matter of fact, you can gauge this by looking at the deals that are out there. First-time buyers for combined salaries under 139K, they've got specials because that's where most of the out of college. That when two people come out of college and get married, one of them is probably earning 50 to 60. The other one's earning 65 to 75. That's where the 100 and a quarter comes from. And then it builds. It builds really quickly because these jobs are paying to keep people. The people that are beyond that are in a house today, they're sitting in houses that used to cost 400,000 that are now selling for 6 or 650, and they're sitting on $300,000 to $400,000 worth of equity. They're in a whole different financial ballgame. They're not strapped by salary. They're strapped by not wanting to incur a higher interest rate. Interest rates, as I said, the Fed lowered it 1% and then went up 1%. If you want to really figure out how the interest rate is figured, you have to go and take a look at the 10-year bond rate. And the 10-year bond rate, you need to add 2.7%. It used to be 1.7% 5 years ago, but there are additional costs and risks, and the more risk, the bigger that vig is between the 2 points. So, for example, this morning's rate, now look it up while we're talking, just to give you a good relative example. Our mortgage rate this morning for a 30-year is 7.07, and the 10-year rate is 4.5. Add 2.7 to 4.5, you're going to come up roughly to that 7.07. You're going to find that, in effect, there's deals out there, and if you pay a point down, you can get this and that, but the average rate for good credit is somewhere right around 7, like I said earlier.
And this is January. Got to remind people, we're recording this January 3rd,
January of
2025.
2025. It's
So
really
they know
hard to
what we're
say
talking
that.
about here. Because in the future, they'll listen to us and say, what are they talking about? All right. So we got to tell people about that and remind them that Joe Peters from joepeters.com is our special guest today. And he comes back every quarter to tell us what happened in the last quarter in the real estate business in Somerset, Hunterdon County, New Jersey, and anywhere else I guess you want to ask him about, folks. And then so let's move on. Yeah.
So the other two things I noted to talk about are jobs. Jobs in New Jersey are not doing well. We're probably sitting at a fraction of the jobs we added last year in New Jersey. I'll look it up while I'm talking. On a national level, we're doing a little better than New Jersey. But total employment, we added 23,000 jobs in New Jersey year to date. That was through November, the last month published. And that's a 67% decline over the year before. And the year before wasn't a great year. So New Jersey jobs are not doing really well. The reason is people are moving out of New Jersey. It's an expensive state. You have to want to live here because you're going to pay extra to live here. It's a great place to live, and people decide this is where I want to live, but you're going to pay extra. On a national level, the jobs are doing a little better, but the numbers, hopefully we get a little more accurate reporting, because we were reporting numbers, and then the next month they get adjusted, and at the end of 9 months they find 688,000 or 866,000 jobs I never reported, that weren't really there. The numbers are suspicious at best, and I think we'll get back to a more honest assessment of what goes on as time goes on. At least I hope we will. And I'm not being political about this. I just think that we've been not given accurate numbers for a long time. But the two things besides jobs is aging. We're hitting what we call a silver tsunami. People are getting older. And as a result of getting older, they're getting to a point where they have to make a decision on what to do with the house. And I work with a guy who says, just like you had to take the car keys away from dad, sooner or later you got to take the house keys away from mom or dad or both. They can't maintain that house safely anymore. And as a result of that, we're going to see a large migration from the seniors to the next level down, which are their kids, in wealth in New Jersey. And it'll either be through inheritance or it'll be through mom's in a nursing home, and I'm going to divest myself. Of the houses I've sold in the last 18 months, half of them have been seniors moving on, either into nursing homes or higher up. It's just fact of life. It's a natural progression. So the difference then gets reflected on the kids. And I know, I'll give you a great example. I was doing a lot of marketing into a very big 55 plus community. And one of the people stopped me and talked to me, and he says, Joe, you're sending me the advertisements. I'm not going to sell this house. My kids are going to sell this house. And even if the parents are just going to go to a nursing home and live out their later years in more cared relationship, the kids are still going to manage that process. So how do you get to the kids? That's my problem to figure out. But the children are typically the ones. I just did a listing in Tewksbury where the parents are already in the nursing home and the kids are cleaning it out and putting it on the market. I did one in Bridgewater where mom died a year ago and the house was sold. These are total renovation. I did one in Branchburg where the guy's wife passed about 2.5, 3 years ago, and he decided he knew people in a certain 55 plus and he was comfortable with it. And he was going to sell a perfectly good house and move to 55 plus. So he was on what I call the conveyor belt, the process of aging and with some assisted living. You can start 100% autonomous, then you can get food, then you can get any needs you need in these types of facilities. And there's a lot of them around. So people say, okay, so it started 2025. What's going to change? And the answer is almost the same as last year, not a heck of a lot. We're going to have more normalization. And by that, I mean an average listing per year, an average listing appreciation per year has been 4.7% for the last 50 plus years. Last year it was about 7%. We're probably going to come down to 2 to 4% this year. So the appreciation is normalizing. Secondly, I think we're going to get more inventory on because people need, remember we talked about the 5 Ds. It starts with diploma, then it goes on to diamonds and the diapers to divorce and to death. Those 5 Ds drive the market. They haven't stopped. There is a backlog. And we're going to have more normalization in price appreciation, but I think we're also going to have more normalization in interest rates. I do think the year after next, we'll see it get into the low 5s. The last time I talked, I thought it would happen next year, and that was based on an expert who I listened to. And things changed so much in the last quarter. We're reforecasting what's happening. First-time buyers, I think, in 2025 are still very restricted. It's hard to find that house. If you're going out as a first-time buyer, you've got to be ready to move. Any decent first-time buyer opportunities can be multiple offer situation. It's not going to be 10 or 12 offers like it was 2 years ago, but it's still going to be 2 or 3. You got to be pre-approved. You got to be ready to sign a check, ready to write a contract and make the offer that day, or it's going to be gone. Your FICO score and your assets and your ability to pay back is what gives you the rate that you're going to get. You've got to be talking to a mortgage guy before you start looking at houses and understand where you are, because you're just wasting your time in a realtor's time. I don't know of a realtor that'll take you out if you haven't been pre-approved anymore. Used to be I could find the money to borrow, but today it's such a tight market. That's got to be lined up. So understanding the process, getting a realtor that you feel comfortable with and trust. And then on the sell side, it's really the same thing. You do not want to sell a house for somebody does 2 transactions a year. I mean, they're a part-timer. You need somebody who's done this hundreds of times before. And I know one of my clients say, Joe, this is the first time I'm going through this. Is this normal? And they're looking to you for advice. I'm saying, yeah, it is. As long as this is in place, you're in good shape. If you don't have this in place, and this side I'm thinking about when I'm talking is that we have the equity, the escrow money in place. They can't back out of a deal unless somebody loses a job or gets deathly ill along the way, and get their money back. So there's a process of 154 steps to buy a house and roughly 200 to sell a house. You need an expert who's done this many, many times before. I sort of qualify. There's a lot of good qualified agents. I think what you need to do is find somebody that's hyper local, that deals in the area you're looking at, and also somebody that you're comfortable with.
Well, I think someone you get comfortable with in the real estate business is Joe Peters right here, because you heard of the 30-second elevator speech in organizations you and I belong to. You have to speak, so get up close to the camera. And I say, okay, Joe, what do you do? I need to sell a house. What do I do, Joe? You know anyone who can help me?
Yeah, I think I can come over and give you some ideas. One of the first things I do is we have tools. I mean, you look at Zillow, and Zillow will say your house is worth so much. It's called a Zestimate. That the fine print on the bottom says we could be 20% off. Nobody ever reads the fine print because they're just using percentages. I'm going to go out and use a tool that looks at all the sales in your area for the last 90 days versus the list versus the tax versus the what's in the house, and give you a much better estimate. And pretty hard to be too far off. We have enough scientific, I hate to use the word AI, everybody uses it, but we have enough information now that we're pretty accurate in pricing a house. The issues in it are how quick can you get out, where are you going to go, and what needs to be fixed. If anything in this market, very little needs to be fixed, but in the over 55s, there's a lot of life in those houses. Every object in every room has a story. That house has to be cleaned out.
Well, you also have to store your stuff. If you sell the house, you got no place to move. You have to store it somewhere. But we're coming to the end of the show, so we have to store this episode in the internet there so people can watch it anytime they want. Nice little transition there. And I ask you this every time you're on this fine program, Cazual Conversations, which is a video and audio podcast. But why do you keep coming back here, Joe?
It gives me an outlet that I don't have all on my own. It gives me somebody to talk to that understands the business from talking to me and from being and doing what you do. And it goes on my newsletter as one more thing I do. I do blog posts, I do videos, I do podcasts myself with different people. And then I do like a reverse podcast like this, where I work with you and we do a podcast to talk about predetermined subjects to bring people up to date. So you need to find somebody who not only understands what's going on, and sometimes the agents, if they're part-timer, don't even understand what's going on, but secondly, can explain to you what's going on. And that's me.
And that's what we did in a half hour. It's pretty much gone here. So call Joe at 908-304-4660. jpeters.com is the website. And reach out to him. He'll be happy to talk to you, show you around great homes if you're buying, you're selling. And it's great. Any final words, Joe? Real quick. Gotta go.
No, I think it's a great opportunity this year because things are changing. And if the wave takes off and we start getting some inventory, you want to be ready to move. And if you're the first-time buyer, you want to be primed to be on the move. And if you're a trade-up buyer, you need to understand what's going on. And I'm working with both. I work more with sellers than with buyers, but I've worked with a lot of buyers in the past. Getting you ready is the key.
Thank you, Joe, and have a great 2025, and I'll talk to you soon.
Great. I'm here to help, and thank you.